I'm here today with Tom Williams, co-founder of DealPoint. And Tom, if I can start out, what does DealPoint do?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. The idea of DealPoint is a mutual action plan up in the cloud. So when you have a complex sale, the best top sellers already set a bunch of milestones between today and the customer actually getting the value that has been discussed. And on a complex sale, there's probably a bunch of different buyers involved and probably a lot of different specific steps that need to happen. If you lay out what those steps are and make it crystal clear, here's what's going to happen over the next 6 months, then it's a lot easier for the buyers to understand, A, these guys know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, and B, they can get all their ducks in a row in advance so that there's no horrible surprises at the end of the deal where you've been putting all this energy into having this thing happen and then it all dies at the end because of fundamental misunderstanding that you could have fixed early on with better communication. Mm-hmm. So we operationalize that mutual action plan and make it easy for not just the top sellers, but for reps of all skill sets to follow the process, make sure they're aligned with the prospect's needs, and get all the way to the finish line.
So the idea of a mutual action plan, the word mutual is very intriguing. It sounds like that's really fundamental to the notion. So the more complex a sale is, the more there is a mutual investment with the client as well as the seller.
Yeah, I mean, plenty of companies have a close plan where I, as the rep, am talking to my sales manager and maybe my sales engineer. How are we going to close this deal? But I think the fundamental problem there is you're not the one with the money. The buyer is the one with the money and the problem. So let's bring them into the conversation as well and make sure that they agree on the steps that we're all going to do here. So,
right. So it's not up to you as the salesperson.
It's really not. There'd be a lot more sales if it was up to you as the salesperson.
Yeah, it's like that old chess joke that says, I had you mated in 2 moves, but you didn't make them.
Yeah. If we can communicate better with the customers, I think the most important part about it is being transparent on both sides. Here are the things that we need for you to be successful. And if they're unable to meet those expectations or unwilling, then that's a really strong sign that you shouldn't forecast those guys to close this month. And then everybody's just better educated. And our company mission is that the world economy is slightly more efficient. That's all we want to do, is waste a little bit less time on both sides for deals that were never going to happen, or deals that just stretch out into the future because they didn't have that mutual expectation.
Right, which is better for the seller, the buyer, and the non-buyer.
Yeah, well, so there's 3 stakeholders. There's the buyer, of course, and the buyer team. So not just one person, but a buyer team. There's the sales rep who's trying to make this thing happen. But there's also the sales manager who's responsible for a whole bunch of reps and ultimately responsible for a forecast that they have to give to their board. And all 3 of those people or groups will benefit from more clarity, more transparency, and more honesty between each other. So, just get everybody on the same page will make it a happy affair for all 3 parties concerned.
Okay. And what do you see businesses and the businesses you work with needing to do differently?
Well, I think when everything's good and the economy is roaring up, then buyers or prospects are a lot more likely to take a risk and say, this might not work out, but if this tech doesn't work out, who cares? We'll figure it out next quarter. In a down economy, then everybody's heads down. They don't want to listen to the new great thing. They just want to keep their heads down and keep their jobs and meet their objectives. So as sellers, we have to recognize that new reality that people aren't going to take a risk. And so it becomes more important than ever to attach yourself to whatever that objective is and say, I heard you say that you have to implement this, IoT solution before your next board meeting. My solution will help you get that faster or more likely or safer or more streamlined, less risky, so that you can hit your objective. And as long as you attach yourself to their objective, there's still budget available. There's still interest. They just have no interest in looking at a whole new idea. because it's just not worth it. They're at zero risk right now.
Yeah. So do you have, can you think of an example, maybe it doesn't have to be a client, but maybe just sort of out in the world, of a business that you think has done that spectacularly right, or conversely spectacularly wrong, in terms of correctly attaching themselves to concerns people have in a mutual non-exploitative kind of way?
Yeah. So Outreach is a software company in my space. I think they've done a good job of recognizing that as people are so they're a sales automation company. As people are working from home and selling from home, there's more need for better reporting and management. So they have changed their messaging and focused more on here's how to manage remotely. They do a lot of outbound content, and a lot of really good content there. Head SDR's name is Sam Nelson, and he does a really, really good podcast on LinkedIn. But he's been really focusing on how to do that job when everybody is remote. So they've changed the messaging, changed their focus, and I don't know what their numbers are or anything like that. But I've seen the content that's coming out of their operation is a lot more focused on helping their customers. In that case, their customers are SDRs. So they are putting all of their firepower into how do you do this remotely? And that's exactly the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's probably the right thing to do, whether or not it spikes their short-term numbers, because one of the things I'm seeing is that the right moves companies make right now is going to define them for a very long time. They're building brand equity that will turn into revenue, even whether or not it can turn into a great deal more revenue at this moment in time in this economic.
Well, I think so I'm a member of MSP, which is the Modern Sales Professionals. It's where a bunch of sales leaders bitch to each other on a group email. But there's, I don't know, 20,000 or something people who are members of this group. And one of the consistent questions is, are you changing your quota? And so the smart people are indeed reducing expectations, because you just got to say, chill. This quarter is not going to be as good as last quarter. Yeah. It's not your fault. That's how it is. And if you try to put that pressure to perform in an unrealistic way on your team, the team's going to freak out. And there's a very good chance that they're going to roll that stress down onto the end customer. And that's something that the end customer doesn't forget, that my guys were freaking out and really pressuring me to close. Yeah. At a time when I too am equally pressured, or probably more so pressured. Right. I don't forget that. So a hard close right now is the worst possible thing you could do, even though you need the money short term. You've got to have a 2-quarter out perspective and not let your needs roll down onto your team, and then definitely a firewall between your team and their prospects. But it's hard to do if you are pressuring them. You just got to chill on the quota. It's not going to happen. And hopefully you got a pile of money somewhere so you can ride it out. So you can do that. Yeah. A phrase I've kind of, I don't know if I coined it or just adopted it from somewhere, is this notion that helping is the new selling. That what we do to help right now brings sales later. Well, so John Barrows is a really good sales trainer, and he's taught this for a really long time. I mean, most of the sales methodologies do say you have to bring value, so that's helping. Sure. And I think it was true back then too, because they can learn about your software from the website, so they don't actually need a demo. They need an approach of how to fix their problem. And that's why the mutual action plan is important, because you're saying, here's your problem, here's a solution, which not coincidentally is my my software. It just happens to be mine. Yeah. Well, that's the area of expertise. That's what I know about. And I mean, hopefully you developed a product for that purpose. Yeah. And also, you can't just be an altruistic saint going around fixing everybody's problems for free. So this is my area of expertise. This is the thing that I've seen this before. I can fix this if you take the following steps. And the mutual action plan is what connects today to that solution, to their problem. Because you want to be able to drill in. There's this logical, easy to understand process. And that's part of the credibility that you're offering in that solution, in offering that value, is not just, wouldn't it be fantastic if everything was great, but here is a sensible, reasonable path how to get there.
To get to great.
That's the expertise that a lot of people don't have. Is of course it would be better if all my team operated and thought the same. Yeah, of course. Right. But how do you get them to do that? That's the hard part.
Right. Yeah. It's the talking heads steps. Question. How do I get there?
Yeah. And I think the value question is a classic one. Everyone says you've got to give value. I can do that because I know my subject area, but I'm not a 22-year-old rep. So it's really hard for young reps to be able to add value when they're fresh out of the gate. One of the strategies I recommend is this was pre-COVID, but take a senior AE or your VP and say, can I buy you lunch? And listen to what those value props are. Side benefit is that they will definitely pay for your lunch. So
and can afford to.
Yeah, they can afford to, and experienced people like telling the younger people, the value and the secrets and how we do this stuff better. Right. But you got to actually have those value props, and you got to be able to do it in order to add value. And
so there's more than one dimension of value. There's hopefully value in the solution that you've built. And then there's a lot of what you're talking about is how you make the sales process itself, how you add value in the sales process itself, value for the customer in how you sell.
Yeah, the first call is not, how do I use my software? It's ideally, it's giving them some insight to what their actual problem is so they can think about it a little bit differently. But that is very hard to come up with. That you got to be a consultant. You actually need to know the industry. Yeah. And that's the part that I think a lot of people kind of paint over.
Sure.
But as a sales leader, you can help your reps understand what those insights are and make them be better consultants.
So you're clearly talking about things that are kind of, in a sense, eternal truths, like these things have been so in all economic conditions. Are there any adjustments that you would specifically advise businesses to make right now, since they're addressing it in the down economy? You described relaxing quotas, but what else would you advise businesses to do specifically for the current conditions?
So for the current conditions, you have to follow your process more than you used to. And one is because you can't afford to chase bad deals or go off piste or lose the plot. You can't afford to have a bad forecast because the margins are thinner now.
Right.
You're going to be bringing in less money, but your company's going to be costing the same. So you need to dial in, are we going to make payroll? And it becomes a lot more important as there's less profit. So you've got to have as good a forecast as possible. And you've also got to be flexible on your process, because what worked last quarter probably won't work this quarter. And that means listening more to the customer calls, and giving your reps better objection handling, better messaging to face what's actually happening to the customers now. Some businesses are doing really well right now. It's kind of a feast or famine. Some of them that are not airlines. There's one company I know they're a virtual whiteboard company, and they were dying last quarter. They're just trucking along trying to get people to use their virtual whiteboards, and now they're not equipped to handle the amount of interest. So things are going to change. As a leader, you want to make sure that you're dialed in, that your process is adaptable, but also that your people are following the process, because as you learn more, you've got to make sure that everybody is using the best practice. And again, it's real easy for me to say. It takes a lot of discipline. And I listen to the calls of my SDRs, and we do regular reviews of why did you go off. And it's not actually script, but why did you go off message here? And lose the plot. When if you stick with what we know works, then we have a more reliable process. So those are my 2 bits of advice.
Okay, so reconcile two things for me. You stated that it's more important than ever for companies to follow their processes, and you've also talked about process flexibility. So give me just a little more on how those two things can come together.
Yeah. So your process has to be mindfully flexible. Like, have options or instruct your team to listen carefully, but then think about what is going to be said. And if something brand new comes up that nobody's ever said, go adjust the process. It's you can build experimentation into the process. Like we have multiple different messages going out to different groups, and we're looking really carefully to see which ones are resonating and which ones are resulting in ongoing sales. But we're doing it mindfully. We're not just having everybody just say whatever comes off the top of their head as if each new call is a brand new day.
Mm-hmm.
So your process has to be flexible enough to accommodate change. But then when you see something that's working, kill the branches of the process that weren't working and don't do those ones anymore. But if you don't have a good process, then the team doesn't know which ones were cut.
Right. How would you tell?
Yeah, because you're always weaving around. Eventually you'll find something that works. Stick with that. And if you hit a roadblock, everybody changed. And maybe it takes a while to figure out how to get around the roadblock, but then you figure it out, build it back into the process, and now everybody's going on the same path again.
Great. Thank you for that. So that dovetails nicely into my next question, which is, in a down economy like this, what opportunities do you see for businesses that you work with to really come out stronger, to come out better than they were before this started?
Well, I did see a thing where in 2009, the Challenger sale was, I think the Challenger sale, I think, came out in 2009.
Yeah, about then.
Yeah. And its whole premise was a different way of selling that I think was really well targeted for a down economy, which was just drilling into that guy's problem and being an actual solution provider rather than a software seller. So I think the companies that are going to do well are those who can get better at drilling into their customers' operations. And so that means that they need to have really good insights, and they need to have good opening skills to develop the trust that it will take for those prospects to open up and say what their problems are. Mm-hmm. But if you can drill in more to the operational process of your customers, you're more likely to be successful.
Great. And if there was one message that you could sort of share out to the world, if you had the magic megaphone and every business person in the world was going to hear you, what is it that you would want to share out right now in this current environment?
I'm from England. I think and we pay 100% of our employees' premiums, healthcare premiums. So they have to pay for their families, but we pay 100% of their insurance, including dental. And it's stupid. It's ridiculous that healthcare is tied to your job. I think it hurts business flexibility because a person's going to be less likely to start up a new company or jump ship because it's nerve-wracking not having health insurance. I've done it.
Yeah.
It sucked. It was, I don't know, 3 years ago, I didn't have any health insurance for 6 months with my family. And we're like, man, it sucked. And it's so dumb to tie healthcare to your job. So as a business owner, as somebody who pays a lot of money for my healthcare of my employees, it's not about the money. It's about the illogic of having a employer-based healthcare system. So that's what I would share. Also, follow process. Also, have a good sales process and look at collaborating and being customer-centric, etc. That's important too.
So in a world where there's perhaps more than one Tom Williams, yep. If someone is intrigued by what you're talking about, this notion of mutual value and mutual clarity in the sales process, how will they actually find you?
Easiest way is DealPoint.io, either on LinkedIn or just on the web. I have a deep love of process and of helping. So I'll help anybody look at their existing sales process and refactor it into a more buyer-centric view, you don't need software to do this stuff. You just need to share what's going to happen with the people on the other side of the table. So yeah, just give me a call, email me or something like that, and I'm more than happy to look at your individual sales process and see if we can make it a bit more customer friendly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom.